How's it going, everyone? I'm Keegs, and this is a new year, so I thought we could talk about the New 52 Batman. Now, I know the New 52 in general was not regarded very positively, and it was kind of considered a failure, but I think a lot of things people agreed on was the Batman run was actually really good. And this came out in a time in my life where I was getting back into comics, so there's always going to be a little bit of nostalgia for this whole run for me as well, so I thought we could talk about it. It's important to note, though, that New 52 Batman timeline doesn't really make any sense. They say it's been going for 7 years, but in my mind, I try to kind of retcon canon that into being 14 years. Just every year that happens in comic book world is 2 years in the real world, just because so much happens. I mean, he's had 4 Robins in this 7-year period, and Nightwing is already around. Everyone's kind of like Red Robin's around. They've all kind of grown up already, and I don't really see how that's possible in 7 years. So in my mind, I try to think of it like, okay, maybe it's actually more like 14 years in the real world. We're going to be talking about all of the arcs through the mainline Batman series, as well as some of the spin-off series, just to kind of tie some loose ends together. Now, the first arc actually introduces a new staple Batman villain who is still brought up and made stories about today: the Court of Owls. Calling it a villain may be a little strong because it's actually an organization of a group of evil people, but you get the idea. This story starts when a powerful group of people start getting offed in the city, and the Court of Owls takes responsibility. Batman is very hesitant to believe the Court of Owls is real because it used to be an old children's story that stated if the court wanted you, they would send a Talon, essentially an assassin, after you. After the death of his parents, he was sure it was a larger conspiracy orchestrated by the court, so as a kid he did a ton of research and actually thought he had found them and tracked them down to an old abandoned house. But it proved to be a fool's errand, and he found no further evidence of the court existing. Later, though, Bruce attends a charity event and meets the new potential mayor, a man named Lincoln March, who Bruce finds has a lot of similar principles to him, and they agree on a lot of issues, so Lincoln ends up actually getting Bruce's support and endorsement. Batman is investigating the Talons, though, when he actually stumbles into a maze, which is one of the best parts of this arc, and I'm sad that a lot of adaptations do not include the maze into the story. Batman ends up wandering around this maze for literal days, and everywhere is just stark white with pictures of other prominent people from Gotham who were trapped in this maze and ended up dying there. The only source of water in this place was a fountain at the center of the maze, but unfortunately that water was a bit drugged, so every time Batman would pass a room with a camera, it would take his picture, and those pictures would get added to the wall to show how he was slowly losing it over time. After 8 days, one of the Talons saw just how resilient Batman was and decided to go in there and end it for him, when Batman immediately attacked him back and actually ended up using some of the chemicals in the camera to create an explosion that dropped him into a river below, and he was able to escape. Alfred gets him back to the Batcave and they get him patched up. To my knowledge, Batman was the only person to ever actually end up escaping this maze, and he took the court for a real surprise there. At one point, a bunch of Talons attack Gotham, and Batman knows that they're attacking the rich and powerful, so he figures that Lincoln is on the hit list. He goes to save Lincoln, but Lincoln is unfortunately stabbed in the chest and presumably dies. The Talons go after Bruce and the entire Bat family, and they're revealed to be some kind of undead which get reanimated with a special serum, one of which is a man named William Cobb. He's actually the ancestor of Dick Grayson, who was actually being groomed to become the next Talon until his parents were killed in the trapeze accident and Dick was taken in by Bruce. The Talons get into the Batcave, and Batman has Alfred lower the temperature to a point where the Talons can't actually move, so it's the only way he's able to actually neutralize them and put them back into a hibernation-like state. He then goes to an abandoned orphanage where Lincoln reveals he's still alive by using the Talon serum. He thinks he's actually the abandoned son of Thomas and Martha Wayne, Bruce's brother. You see, Martha was actually pregnant, but she ended up having an automobile accident and losing the child to a miscarriage. She had actually crashed on the intersection of Lincoln Street and March Street, which explains Lincoln March's alias. Even though a lot of the details of Lincoln's story fit, Bruce ultimately does not believe this to be true, because for it to be true, his parents had to have lied to him at some point, and he does not believe them capable of that. He believes that Lincoln was just coincidentally abandoned the same night that his parents had that crash and killed their unborn son. Lincoln had figured out that the Court of Owls had betrayed him and ended up poisoning all of the leaders, and then he ends up scrapping with Batman until an entire building crashes down on them both. Lincoln's body is never found, so it's likely that the Talon serum he took revived him again under the building. Even though they kind of teased a return for Lincoln March because of that fact, we never actually end up seeing him again, so he is somewhere out there and could return at any point. The mystery around the Court of Owls is very compelling, and it's one of the best stories from the New 52, and it makes sense as to why we keep seeing them brought back now in new stories. The next arc is Death of the Family, where the Joker has returned to Gotham to retrieve his face after it was previously cut off by the doll maker. He hints at knowing the identity of all of the Bat family and ends up capturing them all and serving their faces on a platter to Batman at a hostage dinner. This was actually one of the most WTF moments I had in the entire run, except for the fact that it ends up turning out to be a joke and he didn't actually cut off their faces and they're all just fake faces. Honestly, I was a little disappointed that they didn't follow through with that, because I think it just would have been such a pivotal moment for the whole Batman storyline, but instead it just ended up being a kind of cheap joke that it gets forgotten about. Batman was tied to a chair where Flint was under the legs of his seat, and if he moved, he would catch the whole thing on fire and kill all of the Bat family. But essentially, Batman just says that he trusts the people that he raised to fight and doesn't anyway. In the fight, Joker ends up falling off a cliff under the Batcave. Alfred asks if he thinks the Joker actually knows his true identity, but Bruce tells him that once when he was just beginning to be the Batman, he found a Joker playing card in the cave, and as Bruce Wayne, he gave the card back to Joker, but the Joker didn't even hint at knowing who he was. Ultimately, the Joker doesn't care who's under the mask. In fact, he doesn't want to know. It's just part of the game for him. Later, Talia al Ghul is trying to take over the city after the death of Ra's, and in the process, Damian Wayne, the son of Batman, actually ends up being killed, which is just not a huge loss for Bruce, but the entire Bat family. A lot of times through the New 52 Batman, they try to make it seem as if Bruce doesn't even exist and it's just Batman, but I think this scene right here completely dispels that notion, as you see Batman actually crying at the death of his son, and as much as it seems to others that Batman is more than a person, I think this shows that at his core, he is still just a man, which is also what makes Bruce so compelling. After that arc though, we get a prequel or flashback, I guess, with the 0 year. This starts with Bruce returning to Gotham and not wanting to let it be known that Bruce is actually alive because he is taking on the Red Hood gang and doesn't want the distraction. But his uncle actually does end up finding him and makes sure the world knows that Bruce is alive because he believes in Bruce. Secretly though, his uncle was working with Edward Nygma, who is trying to push him to kill Bruce, though ultimately he doesn't go through with it. He does, however, get blackmailed into joining the Red Hood gang and ends up sacrificing himself in order to save Batman, when Red Hood 1 shoots him. Batman catches up to Red Hood, who is trying to escape, and ends up pulling him backward, and even through Batman's best efforts, Red Hood 1 falls into a vat of chemicals never to be seen again. Or at least never to be seen as Red Hood 1 again. They allude to this being the Joker, but they also allude to the fact that this Red Hood 1 was not actually the original Red Hood 1. You see, Batman had actually found out who Red Hood 1 was at one point, but it just so happens that before that grand heist, that person was found dead. So whoever took the mantle of Red Hood 1 is still a complete mystery. Later though, the Riddler turns off the power to the city and challenges Batman to turn it back on. In the process, they encounter a man nicknamed Dr. Death, who is doing crazy experiments on people, making them very deformed. This is when Batman and Gordon form the beginning of their relationship, and working together, they're actually able to get the power back on and defeat Dr. Death. But Riddler is also able to end up flooding the city. A bomb goes off on the blimp that Batman is on, and Riddler assumes that Batman has died through that. Though months later, it's of course revealed that Batman isn't actually dead, he was just unconscious and is recovering in the home of the Dukes. He tells Alfred that he's not using one of his escapes to get out of the city because he needs to be there and he needs to fix this. Riddler has been putting on this game every day where if someone can ask him a riddle that he can't answer, then he'll let the city go. If he can answer it though, that person dies. He's doing this because he thinks humanity needs to be more intelligent or something, but it's really interesting to me since he's literally just killing off all of the smartest people first, because every time a smart person asks him a question, he kills that person. So subsequently, the smarter people are actually dying first, and I assume that's left with a bunch of dumb people now. A bit counterintuitive to his plan, if you ask me. But anyway, Bruce assumes the Riddler's actually challenging the people to find him, and with the help of Jim Gordon, he is able to find the Riddler and challenge him to one final test, where Batman has to attach some electrodes to his chest to restore power to the city, which he's able to do. Now, that was supposed to actually kill Batman, but of course, Batman just takes it like a champ and doesn't die, despite Riddler's best efforts, and Riddler ends up getting taken into custody. Back in the present day, though, Batman has been going on many adventures with the Justice League and forming Batman Incorporated, as well as Batman Eternal, where he's taking down Carmine Falcone and Hush. You're even introduced to Julia Pennyworth, Alfred's daughter turned secret agent. But then comes Endgame. Joker has returned and he's looking a hell of a lot better than the last time we saw him when his face was basically pinned to his head and falling apart. This arc is all about making the Joker seem like he's literally the devil incarnate and some mystical entity that has actually been around haunting Gotham for centuries. They show lots of news clipping articles and things from the past that show a very pale man who could slightly resemble the Joker, trying to give everyone a false sense of how mystical the Joker truly is. At this point though, Batman notices that something is a little off about him. He notices that the Joker seems even more cruel than usual. He thinks the Joker is trying to end his dance with Batman for good and take out Gotham to move on. Joker has infected everyone in Gotham with pretty much one of his laughing serums, which is a crazy variant of the previous ones, and they actually can't find a cure because they need a specific element known as Dionysium. Batman figures out that when the Joker fell down his cave, he must have found a Lazarus pit down there with this element in it. He disguises Dick as Batman to lure the Joker away and goes down to the cave himself. He ends up finding a bunch of bombs as well as the pool of Dionysium that gave Joker his healing abilities. He ends up getting a sample back to Julia when Joker shows up, detonating the bombs until they actually fight to the death. Both of them die and the cave collapses on them. Ironically, even though Joker is Batman's most iconic villain, I think the Joker stuff is the weakest points in the New 52 Batman. He always feels a bit off and not quite as morbidly funny and a bit too mystical. I think one of the most compelling things about the Joker is the fact that he's just a human and he isn't some crazy immortal demon, but he still proves to be the worst monster out there. Without Batman, the city is hurting, and the police decide to make their own Batman who operates inside the law. Doesn't really make sense since that kind of defeats the purpose, but eventually they ask Jim Gordon to take the mantle of Batman in a mech suit they've created called the Bat Bunny. Jim quits smoking and gets absolutely ripped. Honestly, I didn't even recognize him at first, but eventually he gets into this battle with a new villain named Blooom. Kind of a residual leftover from the days of Zero Year, and this guy is just giving people these seeds that gives them superpowers of a sort, and he himself has many. Jim Gordon now has his own arch nemesis. At the same time this is happening, Superman as Clark Kent actually ends up finding Bruce alive and well. Interesting. He's working for a charity with an old girlfriend named Julie Madison. Clark is sitting in the car with Alfred, who tells him that is Bruce, but it's a completely new Bruce, one without any trauma. When he died in that cave, he actually died. He was dead for hours, but eventually the Dionysium soaked into his body and completely healed it. A brand new Bruce came out of this with no memory of his past life. He didn't just lose his memory, it literally never happened to him, to that brain inside of that body. So without that past trauma, there is no Batman. Plus, he also has lost all his skills that he acquired while training for so many years. When Julia Pennyworth brought him back up, Alfred explained what had happened, but he never got to the part about Bruce being Batman because Batman didn't want to know and actually left. And also, in truth, Alfred didn't want him to know either, to live his life as a normal person, because Bruce finally deserved some happiness. It's also important to note that the body of the Joker wasn't found under the Batcave, and Bruce does meet someone who looks eerily similar to the Joker, just as a human form, and I think it is very, very obviously hinted at that this is the Joker reincarnate, just a man who hasn't quite lost all his marbles yet. Unfortunately, things start to get really bad in the city, and I mean really bad. Blooom has infected the entire city, and lots of people are starting to die. Fear is starting to spread like wildfire. Eventually, Bruce has a meltdown at the amount of pain and suffering happening in the city, and goes to the mansion demanding Alfred take him to his cave. I think he always knew deep down in his heart, but he was enjoying being happy for the time. But seeing Gotham suffer triggers something innate in Bruce that he can't get away from, trauma or not. Alfred pleads for Bruce not to go down there, but as much as Bruce didn't want to know his past, he absolutely could not stand by and watch Gotham burn. Cause that's who Bruce is to the core. He will not sit back while others suffer. Alfred takes him to a machine that Batman had been working on before he died. A machine to infuse a body with all the memories and experiences and skills Batman had in order to create a perpetual Batman. To me, this is like the most magical machine I've ever heard of. Really bordering on crazy sci-fi here, but it's a superhero show, so we'll let it slide because what comes next is one of the coolest scenes in the entirety of the New 52 Batman. Alfred warns him that no one can survive this machine, and he won't do that to Bruce. He won't kill him. That's when Julie Madison walks down and says that she'll do it. She suspected that he might have been Batman, and she also knows that Bruce will not stop trying to save this city, so the best chance to make sure he's able to succeed is if he is Batman. They fire up the machine and run it multiple times until Bruce dies, which is exactly what needed to happen. The innocence of young Bruce had to die for Batman to be born. With Batman back in action, Jim and the rest of Gotham are able to take down Blooom once and for all, and Batman has fully returned, which wraps up the New 52 Batman and leads directly into Rebirth. This is honestly an incredible arc, and I was surprised at how much I loved this final story for the New 52 Batman. Obviously, I skimmed over a lot of these arcs, but I hope it gave you a good foundation as to who the New 52 Batman is and why he was generally accepted as a very positive interpretation of Batman. Now, if you've already read the New 52 Batman, it came out 10 years ago, did you like this more or less than the previous versions of Batman, and do you like the new versions of Batman even more than the New 52 Batman? Let me know down in the comments, but I'm Keegs, and I will catch you all next time for some more comic book content.